Hi, I'm Pastor Billy Eccles Richter, and you've tuned in to Exploring Gratitude, a bi-weekly broadcast where we discuss how gratitude can change our lives and change our world. I'm the pastor at Grace Avenue United Methodist Church in Frisco, Texas, and this morning we're having a group discussion with two of my trusted colleagues. I'm here with the Reverend Joe Stobaugh, who is the pastor of modern worship at Grace Avenue. And I'm also here with Jessica Aziz, who is our minister of outreach and is also a part of the modern worship community at Grace Avenue. Jessica, how you doing?
Good.
Joe, how are you?
Fantastic. Excited to get into our topic today.
Great. So we're going to talk today about what I think is a really important topic, and that's this idea of how we deal with gratitude, or how we maybe employ gratitude in the midst of a world that is lacking trust. I think we all look around and see that there is a lack of trust in our world in so many different settings and situations in our personal lives and in many of the institutions that we love and cherish. And so I want to talk about, can gratitude even make a difference in the midst of the crises that we see around the world right now? I think the way to start today is sort of let's spend a few minutes naming where we see distrust in the world. So right off the top of your head, where are some of the places that immediately you think, gosh, people just don't trust each other anymore in this respect? Anybody have any ideas about that?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's hard to know, where do you begin? You start at the local, interpersonal level, all the way up to the global level. And given the state of politics in our country, I think it's easy for us to miss some of the things that are happening globally. Like I was thinking about this, and Brexit, right, is a prime example of a lack of trust situation where the EU doesn't trust the UK and vice versa, and you can see it playing out in English politics that they're going to ask for a stay for this thing, but with the full intent that it's not going to be granted, and nobody trusts anyone in this situation, and it's part of what's leading to their just absolute inability to make progress on this. Yeah. What got them in trouble in the first place?
Yeah, and I think, at the national level, obviously, I think there's so much mistrust in politics and the government, and that has gone a lot of different ways for a lot of different groups of people. But if you break it down in all the different systems, from our education system to our healthcare system to, people of color's relationship with police and their communities to our church institutions, I think there's mistrust at pretty much every level, and I can say I've personally experienced mistrust, I think, within all of those different institutions already in life. And so I think that's more of the kind of national and local level.
Yeah, I think we experience that certainly in what we're seeing in the United Methodist Church right now as well. Very much different caucus groups not able to trust one another, and then that filters down into our denominational levels at the annual conference and jurisdictional level, and even in some places you can see that in the district and local church levels. I think the lack of trust is a really significant challenge that faces us in nearly every area of our contemporary lives.
So part of what we're trying to do during these broadcasts is to make a statement that gratitude is not just something that sits on the side. It actually is something that needs to be incorporated in all of our lives. And I think the reason this conversation is so important is because we want to think and we want to really reflect on how gratitude makes a difference in these areas of distrust or mistrust. Part of what brought this up is the idea of we're thinking about current events and gratitude. And obviously we just have come out of the Amber Geiger trial. And we recently dealt with the shooting in Fort Worth that happened. And, it's really hard when you start thinking about people and, in this case, police officers who are involved in the public trust, and how that public trust has eroded because of incidents like this. I wonder if you guys might just comment about that a little bit, about we talk about the public trust and what that means, and how does gratitude affect that? Another way of asking that is, how do we deal with our relationships? It seems like our relationships in these very important ways with people that we should trust and want to trust has eroded over a period of time. How do we change that?
Gratitude feels like such a stretch to experience, but I do think that there is some truth in, I think we wait until we say, oh, until things get better, I'll experience gratitude, or until things finally change. And I think that in our day-to-day, there's so many different opportunities as we relate to people, especially to people that we would consider, oh, I don't know if I can trust them, that we can, there's moments, there's opportunities for gratitude in how we relate to one another. But for me, I will say, gratitude just feels like such a stretch. And so for me, I think I have to start where gratitude, and even we've been going through the book of Jonah. And so for me, what I have realized and what I feel like the Holy Spirit has been kind of convicting and inspiring me in is I feel like as a way to protect myself as a woman of color, that I can't have trust for everybody. But I can have relationship with people who are angry, who do join in the lamenting and calling for change. And I think in that there's gratitude that I experience to say there's still hope and there's still opportunity for change to happen in that. And so I think that's in my personal experience, that's a little bit of gratitude that I can hold on to, is that there's always a possibility for redemption and for reconciliation. And what is my part in that as I relate to people in my day-to-day? So
I think that hope piece that you mentioned there is really a profound part of this relationship with gratitude and how we're trying to sort through the way and just the complexities of life in this day and age. And I wonder sometimes too, what common ground pieces can we find with one another to begin to even talk about, you mentioned the case of the shootings. I mean, the amount of time it's going to take to rebuild trust. Well, and let's be honest, like that trust isn't there wasn't there from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the great challenges I know certainly as a straight white cisgendered male, for me, one of the things that I have to continually remind myself is that you can't fix the effects of 400 years of slavery in 40 years. 50 years, 60 years. It can't be done. So how do we work to get to a place where we can at least maybe even find a little bit of common ground in our shared humanity, maybe even, and to hope that God is not a God our God is not a God who is okay with injustice and who will ultimately allow that to stand. So that part of our work is finding that common ground, finding that hope, and the gratitude that, my hope would be that we at least see that we're in this together.
Right. And I hear you say something, Jessica, that I find really important, and that is sort of our approach with gratitude, or another way of saying it is where gratitude begins. Mm-hmm. I think oftentimes when we talk about gratitude as a response. When you do something nice for me, I'm going to send you a thank you note, or I'm going to say thank you for what you've done. And that becomes sort of passive in many ways. I think especially in the difficult areas of our lives that we're talking about now, gratitude's got to be on the front end of things. You mentioned building relationships or rebuilding relationships in terms of the public trust between whatever it is, police officers and the community. I think we have to begin by really rebuilding those relationships and establishing those relationships, but not thanking one another or having gratitude or gratefulness for one another after it's finished, but from the very start saying, I want to enter deeper into this relationship because there's something I already appreciate about you. Yeah. I appreciate what you do as a public servant. I appreciate what you do as a person who serves our community. I appreciate what you do as an active citizen in the community who is wanting what's best. And so I really think there's something, too, about where gratitude begins, that we are talking today in a spiritual sense, that gratitude is not just the thank you response to something that was done good for me, but we believe in a world that God has set up with abundance and goodness. And so gratitude can start at the very beginning of any relationship that we have. So I'd like to change the discussion just a little bit now to talk about some very practical ways in which we practice gratitude. And I want to sort of frame this around this idea that I think many of us think about gratitude as something that is passive, but I think we are called to be involved in a form of gratitude that is much more active. So All right, can you think of specific ways in which we practice active gratitude and we don't just allow our gratitude to become a sort of passive thing? If something good happens to me, I'll say, oh, thanks, that was great. How do we really get gratitude on the front end of the ways in which we live our lives?
So I absolutely think gratitude in our culture, in our busyness, you're saying about basically being able to recognize the God in others. But how do you do that when you're running from day to day obligations and things? And so there's so much intentionality that first and foremost has to come in order, I think, to practice gratitude, to really live into and experience gratitude. And I'm so thankful again that right, we can experience the gratitude in the midst of whatever it is that we're going through. Like, that's amazing. And I think that's changed my perspective of how I experience gratitude and where I look for gratitude in. Because if I'm only looking for gratitude in the good things, then I might not, in my mind, I might not have reason for gratitude, right? But if I see it in all things, including, bad things that we talked about or suffering or whatever, then there's so much more opportunity for gratitude to be able to grow.
I think for me, so much of it starts at a very, very practical, super basic level, and that's with breath. I nearly every morning, I think this is part of this is just training myself to do it. I think practicing gratitude is something that we have to do over and over and over again. The more we do it, like anything else, the easier it gets. But nearly every morning I wake up and just have that moment of like, get another shot at this.
Yeah.
And some days that's hard to say, but I had to tell myself, hey, you actually, tough day yesterday or whatever, but you get another shot at this. And I tend to think of, as someone who really loves history, our time on earth is so short. I just think we're a grain of sand on this endless beach. And so we have this very, very brief window with which to experience all of these wonderful things that God has made. And so I try to approach each morning with like, oh, this is as cliche as it can sound, this is a gift. This is an absolute gift. And what a sheer blessing and joy it is to even be, just to be alive, to be a sentient being. Now it's easy for me to say, I've got a pretty cush life, so I can totally own that. But some of the most deepest spiritual people I know approach life in a very similar way, and that you have breath in your lungs today that God has given you. That's an incredible place to start. I know as a musician, breath is everything. So whenever we're having any moment to be mindful of our breath. And then another practice for me that's been very helpful is the practice of the daily examine in the evenings. So I've even got a little app on my phone that I can pull it up, and it walks me through different ones to help me look back through the course of the day and realize, where was God at work? Where is God doing things that I didn't even see, without a little bit of just 5 minutes of reflection in the evening. And I found that's been really helpful to get a broader perspective of the events of the day. And that way I'm not just totally focused in on whatever terrible thing somebody said or did or whatnot. And then I find that for me, when I do that right before I go to sleep, it changes a lot of the thought processes that are going through my brain. So the next morning I wake up and it's a little bit easier to remember, hey, God's in this today. This is an incredible, today's an incredible day no matter what.
Wonderful that the idea that God is in this today and being able to begin there. At church right now, we're doing this series on gratitude, and one of the things that's been a part of the way we framed it was this idea that gratitude is a muscle that needs to be exercised. And yet, how little during the day. It's no wonder that a lot of my attitudes are atrophied because I'm just not exercising that muscle of gratitude. Gratitude is not about appeasing God.
Right.
And it's not about flattering one another. I think that we have far too often thought about gratitude in terms of being courtesy. It's a courtesy, or it's a form of politeness. And that's really, for me, not what gratitude is at all. It is more of that really deep acknowledgement that I've been given a gift of being thankful. Right? It's not I'm thankful for the gift. I've been given the gift of being thankful. And when I exercise that muscle of gratitude, suddenly everything in my life is healthier.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that's one of the things we have to really look for, because I'm afraid that far too many of us believe that gratefulness is about writing a thank you note or being polite in conversation with people we are really not interested in knowing at a very deep level. And I hope that we don't miss that.
I think that's the same with like happiness and joy too. Like
Yeah.
happiness, you can be happy about whatever, but joy is deep. You know,
Yeah.
it's your inner being. One thing I learned about intentionality with gratitude too is just, chronic illness is rampant in our society too, and it's affected my life in so many different ways, from my best friend to my mom's best friend with cancer, and I really struggled of how was I going to cultivate gratitude, because that pain and that fear of the unknown, it was going to just swallow me and leave me with no hope. And so, for me, practicing that gratitude was reminding to celebrate the small things. It's like, again, I'll celebrate when that big thing happens that I've always wanted, or I'll celebrate when, and we postpone our own joy and gratitude that actually will keep us going through the day.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
But celebrating the small victories, I think, is huge. And then too, personal testimony is such a crucial component of the church and doing community together. And gratitude is not something that we just experience in isolation by ourselves, but it's meant to be experienced in community. And so something that's a challenge for me is it's so easy to get with my girlfriends or go home to Nabil, and, we can go through all the bad things that happened that day, but how much more, would it fill us up to just say, these are some of the good things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or like you said earlier, just reflection that happened today, and getting in that practice of sharing the good things that are happening. And I think in those little ways we can kind of break the cycle of the mistrust and the suspicion that we carry in our bodies. And like you said, Billy, it's deep seated. I think as you experience gratitude, and something that I'm learning for even, folks that are battling cancer, is it does have a very intense spiritual, emotional, physical connection. All of that's so intertwined, right? And so experiencing that gratitude and allowing it, and even just expressing it to your own body. And like you said, that breath, I am thankful that I'm here, I'm alive, I'm working, my system's working today. Man, it just reframes your perspective on life.
I think it's a worldview almost. I know you're talking about the physical pieces. I know there's moments when I'll get some kind of crazy headache, and I just try to stop and go, okay, thank you, brain, for letting me know that something is not right in my head. Right? It doesn't always make it better, but it helps to get a kind of I don't have to just live in the headache, right? I can see it. There's a broader piece to that, and sometimes I think we have to take steps to you were talking about how it's easy to get locked in that feedback loop of just the horror. Like the best thing I did for myself in December of 2016 was turn off notifications on my phone. It's like, what fresh horror has Twitter wrought this morning?
That's pretty practical, yeah.
Yeah.
And you can still be deeply and probably, honestly, maybe even a little better informed in more than 240 characters, with what's going on in the world, while not just exposing yourself to negativity over and over and over and over and over again. And easier said than done sometimes. But I had a colleague ask me once. He came and we were at this meeting, and he said, I just see in you, you're one of the most joyful people I know. What's that about? What's the thing? And if I was my first thought, I said, really, I think it's just gratitude. And that is deeply related to joy. Right? The gratitude gets you to that place where you can live in joy, even in the midst of really, really difficult things. So you were talking about cancer. I'm not sure this totally relates, but right before my father-in-law passed away from cancer, his music minister went to go see him. And he said, Les, are you afraid? And my father-in-law was able to look at him in the midst of just agony and completely metastasized cancer. It was a big smile. He said, what's there to be afraid of? What's there to be afraid of?
So I think I would be remiss today, having both of you here, if I didn't spend a few moments with you talking a little bit about modern worship. You guys are involved in one of the most exciting new ministries that has brought new life into our church with modern worship. and in the modern worship team where Joe and Jessica and our musician Wendy Child are doing great work. I wonder if you guys might take a couple of minutes and comment on how you think gratitude frames what you guys are doing currently in modern worship.
Ooh, I'm ready.
Okay.
Okay, I'm totally ready. All right. So I've said this probably 700 times. I've said this to you, I'm sure. But one of my daily prayers to God is to say thank you for this opportunity to work with these people, our amazing lay folks, and with Jessica and Wendy. And honestly, my prayer to God is very often, dear God, in the presence of these powerful women, help me not to screw it up. How do I stay out of their way and just learn and contribute whatever I have and not just like straight white male over everything? So, it's gratitude with the recognition of like boundaries, man, So I am just deeply, profoundly grateful for this opportunity to work with wonderful people. And I have just been so amazed at God's deep faithfulness and steadfastness as this thing is coming together and growing. And as we're looking at that kind of scary step of adding another service in January, and is that going to dilute the power of the experience? What's that going to be like? But I just moving in gratitude that I really believe that there are people in our community who are looking for this kind of way, this beautiful, generous, generative, open, inclusive way of following God. And they just don't even know that that's a way you can do it. And so part of our work is going to be in discipling and helping people to claim that message for themselves, to go share it with their community, that there's all the terrible ways you see of being a follower of Jesus. There are other ways of doing it that are beautiful and life-giving and profound, and to have the chance to do that in this way is just such a gift.
Yeah, I echo amen, praise the Lord, all the everything you just said, because it is
mostly the staying out of the way part.
No, I mean, but the team that we have together, and I think what makes me most excited and grateful for what we do at Modern Worship is that I think what attracts so many people is because we live into the reconnection, the heart and the vulnerability and the authenticity as pastors, as musicians, as our worship team. And we have that gift that I'm extremely grateful for, that it's not just in us as staff, but it's in the people that make up our church.
Absolutely.
And they have a willingness to share that with other people. And there's always that celebration and that feeling of joy. And you challenge me, Joe, in having gratitude and joy, because I'm like, Joe's happy all the time, it seems like,
I got my moments.
But I mean, I think that there's so much about that is attracting to so many folks that are that we've talked about, the suspicion, that are dealing with that in the day-to-day, and just to have a place to come, to breathe, to be themselves, and to celebrate and to worship fully as they are. I mean, man, that's a gift just to have that. And so I'm grateful for it for myself, and I want to extend that to so many other people, because I do think it's the key to transformation and to change, and to really seeing the gospel here on earth and the kingdom here on earth lived out.
So as the person that sits on the other side of our worship experience and has been at our church now 20 years, I have to tell you that I have a deep sense of gratitude for all the experiences and time I've had with our church over the last 20 years, and the amazing sense in which when we come together in worship, there is that kind of joy that just can really be captured in no other way. And part of it is that now after 20 years, one of the things that I experience in our church, whether it's in our sanctuary worship or our modern worship or out at our campus on 380 at Grace Chapel, is that gratitude is not something that we exhaust. It's not a commodity that you run out of it. I came across this wonderful quote that said, gratitude is a currency that we mint for ourselves, and we can spend it without the fear of bankruptcy. I think this is a beautiful idea that we know that gratitude begets gratitude, and regardless of the experience that you're in, it just continues to grow and develop, and it builds up over time. And one of the things I'm most grateful for about our church is that I do believe we are a church that is full of gratitude. Sometimes we get so focused on the details that we forget to employ gratitude to its fullest extent. But I know that the gratitude exists. Sometimes we just need to make sure we uncover and declutter all the other stuff and find the gratitude again and let gratitude do its great work. And I think that's what's happening in modern worship, is that modern worship now has sort of uncovered once again, hey, there's gratitude all around this place. And here's an expression of how we really live into that.
I think that's part of the power of corporate worship. We talk at Grace Avenue about living a 4G life of faith, right? And we're exploring adding this 5th G of gratitude, which really circles all of these different ways of being a disciple of Jesus. And corporate worship can really help us do that because it brings us together. We build relationships with one another with God. It helps to reorient ourselves, remember that we are the created and not the creator, and that not everything in the world depends upon us meeting all of our deadlines and all of our to-do lists. And then we have an opportunity to practice generosity and gratefulness in the midst of what we're doing together. I mean, it's the reason that first G is gather. It's part of what we do. It's how we're meant to be. And I think the most grateful people that I know are the most deeply connected with others. And you only get to be connected with others and build trust with other people by being with them. I think that's such a challenge in the day of 24-hour news cycle. And I can just look at my phone and never have to talk to another human being ever if I don't want to.
Okay, we're just about out of time. I'm going to put you on the spot for a minute. Okay, we are people of the Word. Are there particular scriptures that you turn to and think about whenever you think about the topic of gratitude?
So my go-to is John 10:10, right? Jesus saying, I came to give you life and to give it abundantly. And I think, I was kind of raised or just thought of it always like monetary abundance. Just because it's kind of the easiest surface level way to think about it. And it wasn't until I kind of was experiencing pain and life and all the complications and complexities of it that I was like, there has to be more to this than that. And so for me, that's my scripture to remind me to cultivate gratitude in my day-to-day, and that there's always joy. And no matter how much pain or suffering or hopelessness is around me, that ultimately I know that Jesus came to give us life and life abundantly, and that again, it's not just for me, it's for everybody, for all of creation, and my relationship with creation as well. So that was one for me.
That's great. I think mine sort of takes this arc of the beginning of Genesis when we learn that we are made in God's image and that there's no human being who is beyond redemption, who is incapable of reconciliation, because we all bear, every single last one of us, the image of Christ in us. And I know sometimes when I'm having a hard time with a particular person, I know, well, at the very least, I can love the image of God that's in them, even if I can't deal with them as a person right now. And then culminating in Revelation with the fact that God's got this. It's going to work out in the long run. If all is not well, then it's not the end. But for me, I think where I locate gratitude probably the most is in the Psalms. That's, for me, just the deep treasure trove of like, yes, it's terrible, and also God's with us, and it's great, and God's with us, and just almost the entire gamut of the human experience is contained in that. So I'm deeply thankful for the Psalms in good days and in terrible days.
The Psalms do a wonderful job of being able to do what we talked about earlier, which is to see the thread of gratitude that runs through every part of our existence. I'm partial to several scriptures about gratitude, but one of the ones that comes to mind is, for me, in 2 Corinthians, Paul talks about this importance of you reap what you sow. And at first that sounds like a little harsh, but then I realized that, the seeds of gratitude that are already given to me, I need to do something with those seeds. I need to plant those seeds. I need to harvest those seeds and watch them grow in my life. I do think it's important that you reap what you sow. And Paul went on to say in 2 Corinthians 9:6 that you'll be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through your generosity, it will result in thanksgiving to God. We are a part of an amazing system of love and grace that God pours into our lives. And how can we not be grateful? And even more importantly, how can we not use that gratitude in active ways to really help transform our lives and transform the world through Jesus Christ. So we're thankful for that today. I've really enjoyed our time this morning. I hope it's been a lively conversation for everyone listening. I know it's been a lively conversation for us as we talk. We are thankful that you are with us. We will continue these broadcasts throughout the next several weeks, and I hope that you will tune in again next week for Exploring Gratitude.